Well, let's return to Canberra and to Lyndal Curtis. Lyndal?
Thanks, Scott. We're joined now by the Acting Shadow Finance Minister, Matthias Cormann. Matthias, welcome to News24.
Hey, good to be here.
What was your first reaction to the budget? It's not as tough as Labor promised, but has the government done enough? It's promising to get back into surplus by 2012-13.
Well, my first reaction was that Penny Wong was right. It's a typical Labor budget. More waste, more taxes, more debt and deficit, and of course more Labor spin. It's very hard to trust Labor's claims of bringing this budget back into surplus by 2012-13. In fact, Julia Gillard was out there today saying back in the black, and I think that these budget papers are bleeding with red ink.
But the government has made some spending cuts. It has reprioritised some spending to better fit its effort to get people back into work, to get to refocus training. Aren't those measures good enough for the economic situation Australia finds itself in?
Well, spending in this budget is actually up by $19 billion. The Treasurer in his speech tonight talked about $22 billion worth of savings. What he didn't say in his speech, what we had to find out in the budget fine print, was that more than $6 billion out of those $22 billion in savings are in fact tax increases and other revenue measures. In fact, the biggest so-called savings measure in this budget is the flat tax, the $1.7 billion flat tax. So really you can't take the Treasurer seriously when he claims $22 billion in savings, which include a whole series of tax measures.
But the budget figures show while the government is still spending in net terms next financial year, the years after that it's saving money.
Well, what the budget shows is that the budget position is deteriorating this financial year by another $8 billion to take the deficit up to $50 billion. That is over 6 months. It also shows that the budget position next financial years will deteriorate by about $10.3 billion to take the deficit to $20.3 billion. The budget papers show that the government net debt is going to go up to $107 billion when last year it was supposed to be $94 billion. And of course, even though the budget is deteriorating this year and next year, the government somehow wants us to believe that in 2012-13, miraculously, there's not only going to be no deterioration, in fact there's going to be an improvement in the budget bottom line. Based on Labor's track record, having delivered 4 out of 4 deficit budgets so far, this is the 9th consecutive deficit budget by a federal Labor government. It is just completely unbelievable that they will ever deliver a surplus.
The government has made some spending cuts that could be classified as structural spending cuts. The changes to fringe benefits tax treatment of cars, the decision to axe the dependent spouse rebate for women who don't have children, those sorts of things. Are you going to support those? Are you going to allow those through the Parliament?
Well, the budget does include a $2 billion assault on Australian families, which are families that are already struggling under cost of living pressures. And of course, if you put that next to a $1.75 billion blowout in the cost of managing illegal arrivals because of the Labor government's decision back in August 2008 to dismantle our strong border protection policies, then really it's quite outrageous that Australian families are being asked by this government in this budget to pay the price for reckless spending, for waste, for mismanagement and for incompetence by this Labor administration over the last 3 years.
But in what ways does changing the fringe benefits tax treatment of cars, in what way does changing the treatment of trusts when people put money in for children to get the lower tax offset, in what way does that have an impact on families? Aren't they measures which do cut where cuts can be afforded?
Look, we will review the government's so-called spending cuts as we go through the detail in the next few days, and we will make decisions in the next few days as to what position we will take in relation to them. But the point I make, though, is this: there is a $2 billion assault on families across Australia by freezing indexation of various family tax benefit arrangements, by freezing various thresholds. And of course, when you put that against the fact that spending on managing illegal arrivals because of Labor's decision to dismantle our strong border protection policies, that funding there has blown out by $1.7 billion. When you sort of put that into perspective, you really see how Labor's waste, mismanagement and incompetence has resulted in families across Australia having to pay the price for it.
Matthias Cormann, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And from Canberra, back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Lyndal.